Played 9 years in Indiana and now on the staff. And that's a live shot now of Caitlin Clark. He's still upset and wants an explanation from Michael Price.
Hello guys, welcome back to TFD. It looks like real change might finally be on the horizon for the Women's National Basketball Association. And honestly, it's about damn time. For years, players, fans, and even coaches have been asking for the league to operate more like a fully professional organization. And now, with the new CBA discussions happening, it seems like the league is finally starting to listen. But before we even get into the big financial changes, travel upgrades, and new facilities, we have to talk about one of the biggest problems from last season, the officiating. Because let's be real for a second, what we watched on the court last year sometimes didn't even look like basketball. At times, it looked more like rugby or an NFL drill than a professional basketball game. There were stretches where players were getting pushed, grabbed, knocked to the floor, and the whistle just stayed silent. Fans noticed it, analysts talked about it, and the players themselves were clearly frustrated. When you have stars stepping up to the podium after games nearly in tears, talking about missed calls and dangerous play, that's a serious problem for the league. We saw moments where players like Caitlin Clark were taking heavy contact almost every possession, with little protection from the referees. Games involving the Connecticut Sun got especially physical, with players like Marina Mabrey and others playing extremely aggressive defense that often crossed the line. And the injuries that came with that level of physical play only made the issue worse. It wasn't just one team or one player complaining either. Multiple players spoke out publicly. Gabby Williams talked about the lack of foul calls. Kelsey Plum expressed frustration with the way games were being officiated. Even coaches were speaking up, pointing out that something clearly needed to change. So now, with the new CBA discussions and league reforms being talked about, one of the biggest questions is whether the WNBA will finally address the refereeing standards. Because if the league truly wants to grow, protect its stars, and be taken seriously as a professional product, getting the officiating right is absolutely essential. And that's exactly where this conversation begins. So, lads, today we're going to be talking a little bit about this from the new CBA. And this is from an article right here from ESPN. The new CBA will permanently, positively change the WNBA's landscape. Here are the 10 biggest wins, gains, and areas of compromise. However, I'm not going to talk about anything else in this article other than this right here. This is huge. This is huge, lads. Huge. The WNBA CBA doesn't bring any groundbreaking officiating changes. Let me just scroll and zoom out a little bit here so you guys can see. But it does include that the union will be given access to informational, educational, and points of emphasis videos regarding officiating. And it also requires 3 meetings per season between the league and the union, specifically to review flagrant fouls and technical fouls. If nothing else, this should give the players more of a sense that their input on officiating is actually being heard. Let's talk about something that most fans don't really think about when they're watching a game, but it actually plays a massive role in how the sport looks on the court. And that's the way referees are instructed to call games. Because here's the thing. A lot of people watch Women's National Basketball Association games, or honestly any professional sports league, and they immediately assume that if the officiating is bad, it's just because the referees themselves are bad. But the reality is, that's not always the case. In fact, a lot of the time, referees are simply doing exactly what the league has instructed them to do. Every professional league operates with what are called points of emphasis. These are essentially guidance videos and instructions that the league sends to officials, explaining what they want prioritized during games. Sometimes it's about speeding the game up. Sometimes it's about reducing certain types of contact. Other times it's about allowing more physical play. For example, a league might say they want a more free-flowing game with fewer whistles, so referees are told to ignore certain small contact situations, like light hand checks in the backcourt. Or maybe the league decides they want to promote physical defense in the paint, so they tell referees to allow more bumping and body contact around the basket. Those decisions aren't made by the referees themselves. They come directly from the league office. And this is something that a lot of players, coaches, and even fans don't fully understand. The referees often get blamed for everything, but many times they're simply following the guidelines they've been given. If the league wants more physicality, refs allow more physicality. If the league wants tighter foul calls, refs tighten things up. Now, where this becomes a problem, especially in the WNBA last season, is when the league leans too far in one direction. Because what we saw in many games last year wasn't just physical basketball. It crossed the line into something that honestly looked chaotic at times. Players were getting grabbed, knocked down, hacked on drives, and the whistle just wasn't coming. And a lot of fans started asking the same question. Why the hell are referees letting this happen? Well, the answer might actually come down to the direction the league wanted the game to go. There has clearly been this idea floating around that the WNBA should lean into physicality as part of its identity. The thinking seems to be that tough, hard-nosed defense makes the game look more competitive and more entertaining. But the problem is, there's a huge difference between physical basketball and reckless contact. Physical basketball means fighting for position in the post, contesting shots, battling for rebounds. That's part of the sport. But when players are getting elbowed in the face, undercut while airborne, or hacked repeatedly on drives without calls, that's not good physical basketball. That's just poor game management. And that's where the frustration from players really started to boil over. We saw multiple players step up after games and openly criticize the officiating. Some were clearly emotional about it. They weren't just complaining about a missed call here or there. They were talking about safety and consistency. Because when referees allow too much contact, players start adjusting their behavior. Defenders become more aggressive because they know they can get away with it. Offensive players start anticipating the contact, and suddenly the entire game becomes rougher and more chaotic. Now, here's where the new transparency coming from the league could actually make a big difference. One of the major developments being discussed is giving players more access to the educational material that referees receive, including those points of emphasis videos. If that happens, it means players will actually be able to see what referees are being told behind the scenes. And that's huge. Huge! Because historically, these instructions have been completely hidden from players and the public. So when a game gets extremely physical, players might think the referees are just doing a bad job, when in reality, the refs might be following league instructions. If players can see those directives themselves, it changes the dynamic completely. Suddenly, there's accountability and transparency. If the league is telling refs to allow certain levels of contact, players will know it. If refs are deviating from the instructions, that becomes obvious too. In theory, that kind of transparency should improve officiating standards. It also protects referees in a way, because again, most referees at the professional level are extremely qualified. You don't accidentally end up officiating in a top league like the WNBA. These officials have spent years climbing through lower leagues, training programs, and evaluation systems. But even great referees can look bad if the instructions they're given create chaos. If you tell officials to allow excessive physicality, the game can spiral out of control. Players get frustrated, coaches get angry, fans think the referees are incompetent, and suddenly everyone is blaming the officials for something that started at the league level. Now, will this new transparency completely eliminate complaints about referees? Probably not. Complaining about referees is practically part of sports culture. Players are competitive, coaches are emotional, fans are passionate. Someone is always going to be unhappy with a call. But what transparency can do is reduce the confusion. If players understand the standard being enforced, they can adjust to it. Another interesting aspect of WNBA officiating is how inconsistent technical fouls sometimes feel. There are moments where players seem to say very little and immediately get hit with a technical, and other moments where players are clearly arguing with referees and nothing happens. Take situations involving star players like Caitlin Clark, for example. There have been games where Clark barely reacts to a call and ends up getting a technical foul. But in other moments, she might be visibly frustrated, even approaching a referee to argue a call, and nothing happens. That inconsistency is what tends to frustrate players the most. It's not necessarily the call itself, it's the unpredictability. Players just want to know where the line is. If arguing with a referee gets you a technical, then make that standard consistent. If emotional reactions are allowed, then allow them for everyone. Consistency is the key. And that's why the changes being discussed right now could be a positive step forward for the league. More transparency, better communication between the league, referees, and players, clearer guidelines for how games should be officiated. If the WNBA wants to keep growing, especially with the massive attention the league has been receiving recently, the product on the court has to look professional. That means protecting players, enforcing rules consistently, and making sure games are decided by basketball, not chaos. Because at the end of the day, fans tune in to watch great players compete. They want to see skill, strategy, and exciting moments, not players getting mauled without whistles. So if these changes lead to clearer standards and better officiating, that's a win for everyone: the players, the referees, the coaches, and the fans. Let's be honest for a second. Caitlin Clark should not be getting beaten up every single night while only shooting 3 or 4 free throws a game. That's ridiculous for a player who attacks the rim as much as she does. It finally seems like Kathy Engelbert has started hearing the complaints around the league. And credit to Cheryl Reeve, who absolutely blasted the league over how these games were being officiated. Sure, it's frustrating that it took one of her own players getting hit for it to happen, but speaking out mattered. Honestly, the league needed officiating changes yesterday, and this feels like a step in the right direction. But I want to hear what you guys think. Do you believe the officiating in the WNBA last season went too far with physicality? Do you think giving players access to referee instruction videos will actually improve things? Or do you think fans will always find something to complain about when it comes to referees? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.